In this video, we're going to take our level 1 Paladin and progress that character through to level 20. And in this particular process, we're going to go through and explain all of the features that you're going to expose and be able to make use of, as well as how to set them up and actively use them in some certain combat situations. So with that, let's begin the process of going through the various levels. In relation to level 2, we're going to acquire no change in our proficiency bonus, but we will acquire 3 new features. Those features are fighting style, our spellcasting capability, and something called Divine Smite. So let's apply the level. Alright, and then I'm going to open up the abilities here, and then we'll go over each of these. So the first feature, called Divine Smite, gives us the ability to essentially add additional damage to a particular creature once we've hit them with a standard melee weapon attack. So let's say we used our longsword and hit an ogre, we could potentially then hit that ogre with additional divine damage or radiant damage, excuse me, for each expended spell slot that we wish to provide in this particular purpose. So we currently have, where are our spell slots? None at the moment, but we should have 2. So we can fix this by adding a 2 here. And that gives us our first 2 spell slots. And if you run into that particular problem, just simply go in and modify that. That's not that big of a deal. So, because this is a feature that we're going to want to make use of, we're going to add this to our Paladin grouping here. Did I Paladin? Oops. Let's try spelling it right. There we go. I'll just remove that group. Now, what does this actually give us? What this does is it gives us the ability to do extra damage of 2d8 for the first level spell slot, plus an additional 1d8 for each spell slot higher than level 1, to a maximum of 5d8 for our total damage. The damage increases by 1d8 if the target is an undead or a fiend. Now, you may have noticed that no effects actually came into play when we went and added Divine Smite to our grouping here, which is right here. And if we minimize this, that's associated to our Lay on Hands ability. Well, we need to be able to make sure that we can actually go through and make use of this. And I'm pretty certain Divine Sense needs... Yeah, so this should be 2 daily uses. I'm not sure why that changed. Anyway, so there are a couple of ways that we could go about doing this. The first is simply to add a 1d8 damage to this particular effect. And we can do that simply by adding that, modifying the damage by adding a new type, dragging a 1d8 into place. It is going to be no bonuses. And it is going to be radiant as the damage type. So that gives us 1d8 of damage. Well, there's a little thing that you can do. If you left click down on that damage button and then drag it away while still holding down the left mouse button, you can simply right click to continue to add additional die. And in this case, that would be a maximum of 5d8. So let's say we used our maximum number of spell slots. Then you just roll that into place, and voila, you've done 18 points of damage. Now, we start off with 2d8 points of damage. So let's modify this to actually be 2d8, not just the 1. Now what happens? Well, if we drag this out the same way we had done before, we can still right-click and only add 1 additional dice. So this gives us a very nice, convenient way to state I'm going to expend up to level 4. So I'm going to expend 4 total spell slots in order to be able to cast this. Actually, that is incorrect. That would be I'm going to expend a level 4 spell slot or level 5 spell slot to be able to get 5d8 of damage. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I was just rereading that because that actually is a bit of a confusing point there. Yeah, no, rereading it. Essentially, if we had a fourth level spell slot, we would start off with 2d8 points of damage for the first level, and then we would add 3 additional die to that to get our fifth. So the highest we can go is a fourth level spell slot in that particular case. So for each level above 1, you add 1 extra die. Just to help clarify that out a little bit. That was a much better roll than the other two. Now, what about that extra 1d8 if the target is undead or a fiend? Well, you can just do the same thing. If you're only going to expend the first spell slot, you just drag it out, right-click once, and you're doing that 1d8 of extra points of damage. But if you've set it up so that you're doing the maximum amount that you can do, all you then do is add 1 more die to the total account there. That is the first option. That is the most easiest way to do it. But there is an additional option that you could do. You could create an additional damage effect for, let's say, if you want to expend a second level spell slot. You would drag 3 die into place, and it would be radiant damage. And this way, all you have to do is click on that. And the reason why this is convenient is if you're in a combat tracker scenario here. So let me just add our Paladin into this particular combat tracker. Oops, I need to... Interesting. It's showing a portrait here, but it is not showing a portrait on the Dungeon Master screen. All right, let me just quickly set up a token here. It's quite a few tokens here, so it takes a second to load. Paladin, there we go. That'll do. Right, double click. Okay, now I have a token I can use. There we go. Okay. So now our Paladin is here, and I'll just move the action to the Paladin for now. So let's say I'm going to attack this succubus right here. Well, a succubus, I do believe, is a fiend. That is correct. So, why did that not target? There we go. So, let's say that I attacked that succubus with this particular sword here. Well, that's going to be a miss. That's going to be hit. Okay, so I have now hit. I do the die damage for the sword first. So I've done 6 points of damage. But then what I can do is, and let's say that I only used a second level spell slot, which means I'm dragging this over. Well, this is a fiend, which means I just right click once, drop that onto play, and it will roll that damage and automatically apply that damage to the succubus. You don't have to worry about doing anything. But at the same time, if this wasn't the succubus that you had targeted, let's say it was the adult dragon that you had targeted, that wouldn't have that extra 1d8 points of damage here. But let's say I still wanted to expend a second level spell slot. Now, granted, I actually don't have one here because the character is not high enough level. I'm just using that as an example. All I have to do is click it, and it will automatically apply the damage to the dragon. So it saves you the need to have to go and drag it out, add the appropriate number of dice, and then drop it right over the token in order for it to actually apply. All you do is click. You don't have to do anything else. So adding all of that in here is nice and convenient. But then you can come back with the question of, okay, so I'm only going to expend a first level spell slot, but it's an undead or a fiend creature. Well, then all you do is you click the 3d8 radiant damage, and you do the damage as you normally would. You don't have to worry about clicking this. So you can go through and quote-unquote preload all of your total damage dice here up to the maximum of 68 for the one case or the few cases where that creature is either going to be an undead or a fiend type of creature. And then you don't need to really worry about it after the fact. So, in this case, this will be 4 radiant damage. Add another one for 5. And I will go ahead and add the 2 of them now. Modify this. Add, so 1, 2, 3, 4. That gives me 5. So 5d8 radiant damage. And then I simply do the same thing for this one and just add out the 6th die for the case where you're rolling your maximum amount of damage that you can do. And the creature is undead or a fiend. So now you have all of your options available to you, and you can just hide them behind that. And when you go into your combat situation, you just choose the right one that you want to click on. So let's say, for example, that the succubus is the target in question that you're going to deal with. And I'm just going to zero out all the damage here so that they're all healthy. So let's say the succubus is the target in question that you're going to attack. And let's say we also happen to have a 4th level spell slot that you're going to make use of, meaning that you're going to be dealing with 5d4 points of damage. Sorry, 5d8 points of damage, plus the additional 1d8 because they are a fiend. All you do is click this, and you don't even have to do anything else. They will just automatically take the damage. So it keeps the flow of the combat moving at a faster pace. You don't have to sit there and wait while someone does yep, and flap. So, and if somebody messes up on the number of dice that they added, oh, they have to drop it, then they have to wait, and then they have to pick it up again, and then add the additional dice. So that's how that would come into play. And I just killed that succubus. Oops. Right, so that is this particular Divine Smite capability. So the next feature you gain is Fighting Style. And this gives you a couple of options, 4 to be specific. And it comes down to how you as a player want to play this particular character. If you want to focus entirely on defense, this gives you the ability to create what's known as a fighting style defense stance. And while you have taken the defense capability, if you will, within this particular fighting style, you will be able to essentially gain a +1 bonus to your armor class while you're wearing armor. And we are definitely wearing armor being a paladin, so we would have an AC of 19, which means we're practically impossible to hit already with an AC of 18. That's actually quite impressive, considering that the dexterity is fairly low. In any event, the other option is dueling. When you are wielding a melee weapon in one hand and you are not holding any other weapons in your other hand, you gain a +2 bonus to the damage rolls that you do with that particular weapon. That includes a shield, by the way, so you would not be able to hold a shield because a shield can be used as a weapon. So because of that classification, you cannot hold a shield and gain that bonus. You have to drop your shield. So think of it much like a fencing kind of style of fighting. Great weapon fighting, when you roll a 1 or a 2 on a damage die for an attack you made with a melee weapon that you are wielding with 2 hands, you get to re-roll one of those dies those 1s and 2s, and then take the new damage that comes up. That one's actually fairly easy to set up. And it's probably going to be the one that, well, actually, no, it's not going to be the one that I'm going to take for this particular character, but it is going to be one that I will demonstrate. When a creature you can see attacks another target other than you and is within 5 feet of you, you can use your reaction to oppose disadvantage on the attack roll. So you can essentially take a fighting style called protection, where you intervene in combat between 2 other parties. And that's essentially what that comes down to. So this isn't something we add to our actions tab, unless you're going to use the the 4th option there, the protection one. But if you decide to choose fighting style of defense, you will gain a +1 bonus to your AC while you're wearing armor. So what you would do is you would click on your main tab here, you would click on this magnifying glass here, and simply modify your armor. That's not what I want to do. Oops, I did it again. I actually wanted to set that. So you set that miscellaneous value to 1, and it adds the 1 hit point to the AC there. You want to leave everything else the same. And the reason you want to do that is because as you add and remove armor, that changes all of these particular fields over here. This will come into play when you remove the armor, though. So that's something you're going to want to take into account. But if you modify this armor here, or this field here, when you remove the chainmail, and I will show you how this works. So if I remove the chainmail from something I am wearing to simply something I am carrying or don't even have, you'll see that this value goes away. And if you equip it, it returns. If you're carrying it, it doesn't add anything here. But the one that I added here still has to be taken into account because I'm currently not wearing armor, which means I remove that one. Well, there technically could be another way that you could do this. You could change that from a 6 to a 7. That way, if your chainmail comes off, that value goes away. But when you put it back on, it is going to automatically return to the previous value. So you've got to remember to put it back at the 7. Whereas if you leave it here, you won't forget to re-add it, but you might forget to remove it. So it comes down to what you are going to feel the most comfortable doing. Now, the other thing too is maybe you change your chainmail armor to, say, something that has a higher stat. All you have to do is add the one additional point of armor to that in order to be able to remember to do that. So that's how that will work. Oops, I'm going to remove that because I don't need that. That's not the... Actually, yeah, that'll be the style I choose for this particular character, but I'll show you the other styles. So what I like to do is when I've chosen a fighting style, I like to make sure that I tell the Dungeon Master what one I have selected by putting it in brackets after the fact. Now, do we gain a fighting style later on? No, we don't. So this is going to be the only fighting style that we gain using this particular character. Now, what about dueling? Well, dueling comes into play as follows. The longsword would classify as a one-handed weapon as long as you weren't holding any other weapons in your other hand, including the shield. What you would do is you would modify... no, it wouldn't be there. You would simply modify this and add in the bonus 2 points of damage here. And that will give you the +6 damage that you need to do there. The other option is that you could simply remove, or like add in a new item here. So you remove that, and then you put the 2 there, so that when you do the damage, because it shows it a little weirdly, but it does work. So if I were to roll that, for example, you would see that it added a +6 bonus, not the +4 bonus. And that's because it's automatically adding that too. Now the damage type here is the reason why it's out like that. And unfortunately, it does this very strangely. But I don't like this way because it gets clunky over time. So all you want to do is just simply add the 2 there. And it makes it nice and clear there. That's what you'll do if you take dueling. Now that sort of implies that you would remove your shield from being equipped. You wouldn't be carrying it anymore. Great weapon fighting style essentially allows you to re-roll a 1 or 2 on a damage die for an attack you make with a melee weapon that you are wielding with 2 hands. To ensure that you only re-roll a 1 or 2 when you are using the weapon in a 2-handed style of attack, we need to change how we're making use of our longsword. If you recall, it has this versatile capability, which gives it a 1d10 roll of damage when you're holding it in a two-handed style. But we kind of cheated around that by making use of this effect and this roll here. This won't work in relation to setting it up for great weapon fighting style. And the reason for that is you can't modify the properties here to go about and make that adjustment. And we can't add an effect that will work in combination with this damage to do the reroll. So we actually have to go through and essentially eliminate this if you decide to take the Great Weapon Fighting style. If you don't take Great Weapon Fighting style and take one of the other options, then this will still apply. So you wouldn't have to necessarily eliminate this from your character sheet. But how do we go about and actually deal with that? Well, what we can do is we can clone, this longsword onto the actions tab here. Sorry, not the actions tab, in the inventory. And what we do is this. We add in, come on. No, that's going to change that existing one. All right, no. So things have changed slightly since the Classic Edition. So 1 second here. Let me put this as back as right hand and set that like that. Now what I'm going to do is go over to items and look for the longsword. And I'm going to drop another longsword into here. So I will, however, set this weight to 0. And I don't know why there's a difference there. Note it, in case you didn't notice that. Oh, that's because I chose a longbow. Oops. My bad. Let's get rid of that. I want long sword, not long bow, so sword. I apologize for anyone who caught that and was screaming at me to go, hey! So I'm going to zero out the weight here. And the reason why I'm doing this is because you're not necessarily going to have 2 weapons in your inventory. You're just setting things up so that your actions tab reflects that you have 2 weapons. And I'm not sure why that didn't. No, maybe because I haven't. So scabbard for now, just to make sure that it's in the same location. Now you'll notice here that the name of the weapon didn't change here. So what we have to do is this. One hand and two-handed. And what that allows us to do is set this up so that instead of doing the 1d8 of slashing damage, so I just want to remove the dice, we're going to be doing the 1d10 of slashing damage. We can then modify this particular property up here and add reroll 2. And what that's going to do is automatically re-roll any die that come up with a 1 or a 2 without us having to do any further intervention. Now, this isn't necessarily the cleanest way to do it because you now have this quote-unquote magical weapon in your inventory. Well, I can live with that for a certain period of time for the DM. Now, if I do the damage, let's see if we can trigger a reroll here. Yeah, when I don't really want to do high quantities of damage. There we go. That is a 1. It looks like it re-rolled the 1 and got another 1. So something you won't see is the actual re-roll happen, but what you will see is if you look in this previous roll here, the tag or the property to re-roll 2 is being picked up. And I must have rolled a 1 on the first portion of it in this particular case, and then it re-rolled and got another 1. Let's see. Are there any other indications that it re-rolled anything else? No. So that is definitely working the way that we want it to function for now. And this is how you'd have to do it in order to take the Great Weapon Fighting style. Now, this one here, all you're really doing is protecting somebody else and essentially granting a particular creature disadvantage on an attack roll, or on their attack roll. So this is something you would action. And you do this by dragging and dropping it into place. We're going to set this up. And this is if you took the protection thing. So protection. I'm just going to make note that that's what this is. It is a paladin skill. I did it again. Okay. It is a Paladin skill. And what you're going to be using is your reaction to impose disadvantage on another creature. So that is going to be an effect. And the way this works is that you want this effect to be fighting style. Protection. Semicolon. And then you want to grant dis ATK. And it's going to be on whoever you target, and it's going to be on the next roll. Now, the person you target is going to be someone you drop this on. So let's just say, for example, this ape happened to be on the same team that the paladin is on. What you would do is you would drag that effect and drop it right onto your party member so that when somebody attacked that ape, now I'm going to attack this ape with this particular character, so I'm going to untarget that and target that. You'll see it's rolling 2 dice, and I'm gaining a disadvantage on that particular roll. That means that the effect is working the way that we want it to. So instead of it being dropped onto the ape, you would drop it onto your party member. And that will allow you to grant, before that creature makes their attack roll, you'll be able to grant your that creature the disadvantage to their attack roll. But there is a catch. You must be wielding a shield. So that is where this would come into play when it comes to a shield wielding thing. So essentially, defense and protection will work with anyone wearing a shield. Defense will work with anyone not wearing a shield. And then these two will work if you're doing one-handed weapon attacks. And this one will work if you're doing two-handed weapon attacks. And this one will still work if you're only doing one-handed weapon attacks. So that's essentially the differences between these various fighting styles. And that covers everything that we need to know around the fighting style. So the next feature is your spellcasting capability. And I misspoke in the previous video because I indicated that wisdom was the spellcasting requirement for paladins, but in fact it's your charisma. So I should have actually set my charisma to be a higher value when it came to my stats. Instead of the 13 that it currently is, it should have been that 17. But, whatever, it's a learning process when it comes to all of this stuff at the same time. Having said that, however, this is how this works. Unlike clerics and other spellcasting kinds of creatures that are divine, the paladin doesn't get to choose all of the spells that they have available to them and add them to their actions tab in preparation for spellcasting. So, in case you weren't aware, a cleric can choose all of the spells that they have listed and available to them, add them to their actions tab, and then those spells are available to them for them to cast as long as they have active spell slots. There's no preparation, there's no memorization, stuff like that. A paladin, however, works differently. The paladin gets a number of prepared spells based on their charisma stat. So with a charisma of 14, for example, your list of prepared spells can include 4 spells of level 1 or level 2, or any combination. So you could have 2 first level spells prepared and 2 second level spells prepared, or you can have, as long as you had the second level spell slot unlocked. You could have 3 first level spells and 1 second level spell prepared, those kinds of things. So it's a combination that you have to work out. So it's based off of your charisma modifier plus half of your paladin level rounded down to a minimum of 1 spell. So in our particular case, our charisma is a 13, which means that we are gaining a +1 charisma modifier, and our level, being level 2, means that we are gaining a 1 additional spell. So we're equaling a total of 2 spells that we can learn at this particular level. And that's rounded down. So at level 3, we will still only be able to make use of 2 spells. Well, the first thing I'm probably going to want to do at level 4 with this particular character is increase my charisma so that I can increase the number of spells that I want to be able to cast. And that's how that particular process works. So let's make the assumption, for the purposes of providing a cleaner demo, that I did in fact put the 17 here, sorry, the 16 here and the 12 here. So let's change that to the 13 and let's set this to the 17 because remember, humans get +1 to each. Now I have the ability to have a +3 modifier here to my charisma. What that now gives me the ability to do at level 2 is learn 4 level 1 spells, or prepare, I should say, 4 level 1 spells. And that's how this particular process works. So it's based off of your charisma, not your wisdom. So I apologize that, and I'll make sure that I add a correction in that video as well. So, what spells do you have available to you? Well, they are listed directly from your Spellcasting tab, which you can get to right here at the bottom of your class sheet. And then within that, you'll see this Paladin spells listing, and this will list all of the spells that you as a Paladin can take, regardless of whether you are an Oathbreaker or whether you've taken one of the other three class specializations, and I have no idea why I couldn't think of that word right now. So, in this particular case, I'm going to put this back at the 17 there and the 13 there. So I'm only going to do the 2. Just means I have to worry about less spells later on. All right. Now, I am going to take Cure Wounds. And I can already... Well, it's not so much I'm detecting good and evil. I'm essentially able to do so, sort of. But I'm going to take Thunderous Smite as well. So those are going to be the 2 spells that I'm going to take. And you have to prepare them. This means that these spells have to be available to you for use in order for you to be able to cast them. And then when I burn through my spell slots, all of those spells are going to go away. So that's how that is going to work. And that's how spellcasting within a Paladin sphere actually works. Now, what about the DC saves? In this particular case, your charisma is going to provide the DC saving throw that you are going to apply on a particular creature whenever you cast a spell. So we have to make sure that charisma is the ability score that is there, and it automatically sets it up for us, so we don't really need to do anything here. And it will go through and make sure that adjustment is in place. So it's 8 plus your proficiency bonus, which is +2, so that gives us +10, plus your charisma modifier, which is +1. So in this case, anyone who rolled a saving throw on their strength saving throw of 11 or higher would be able to succeed on this particular saving throw. So the first thing that we are going to want to do as a paladin is actually increase our charisma to increase that number as high as we can get it. And that's when we get our ability score improvements. Now with that, I'm going to actually end this particular video here because level 2 is one of those levels in this particular case that takes a little while to explain the initial setup because you're getting some very complicated features that are added to the particular character. And there's a number of options that are available to us. So this video is now over 30-ish minutes. So I'm going to set it up so that levels 3 through 20 are in another video, and I should be able to go through those fairly quickly because once you get past essentially level 5, everything sort of speeds up on the actual explanation process as you level through a particular character because there are several things that are repetitive now. So with that, I'm going to close off this particular video. So it sucks that this was literally just level 2, but we covered a lot of information in this particular video. So I will see you in the next part where we continue to go through this particular character. I wish to thank you for taking the time to watch this particular video. I hope you found it informative and useful to familiarizing yourself with Fantasy Grounds in general, and that you had fun in the process. If you found the video useful and you liked the content of the particular video, go ahead and click that like button to let me know. And if you have any questions specific to the topic covered by this particular video, or just have some comments in general, please feel free to post something in the comments section, and I will do my best to respond to any questions that are asked. Additionally, I do release content quite regularly, and it's generally specific to Fantasy Grounds or 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons at this time. So if you'd like to be notified when new videos come out, go ahead and subscribe and click the notification bell to ensure that notification is sent to you when I release a new video.